Hello, all, and welcome to the Caregiver Support Series. Hey guys, it's Sarah, and I have to say, I ended up taking a few minutes last week to do those self-care activities for myself, and it was pretty therapeutic for me. I hope you found something to reflect on from last week. Today, we're talking about grief, specifically as it relates to today's circumstances. So grab a cup of your favorite hot beverage and sit back. As always, feel free to reach out with questions, comments, or topic suggestions. Today's episode is a tough topic, but I'm excited and honored to have my first guest, Maren Simon, hosting Words to Describe. Maren is one of the wonderful bereavement counselors that we have at Hospice of Northwest Ohio. They are available for over-the-phone visits during this time, and that is offered to anyone in the community for free. The Education Corner involves a few examples of different cultural approaches to coping with grief. Nurse tips are two quick items: the one thing you never do, and the one question everyone should answer. As usual, there will be additional related content for you at the end of the episode, and my sources are cited in red. Next week's topic is common medications used at end of life.
So we'll start by asking the question, what is grief? And I know many of you might define this differently. It's defined in the dictionary as keen mental suffering or distress over affliction or loss, sharp sorrow, and painful regret. And grief is individualized. No one person is the same, and therefore your grief experience will not be the same as another either. And grief impacts the whole person. It impacts you mentally, physically, emotionally, behaviorally, and spiritually. You can feel a variety of things. You might feel preoccupied at times. You have a lot on your mind. Maybe at times you feel a bit hopeless, powerless. Maybe you feel anxious or find yourself tearful at times. Truly, there's no one right way or wrong way to grieve. Like I said, it's individualized. And I'm asked often, how long does this last? How long does grief last? And the unfortunate reality is there's really no timeline for grief. And now, while grief is most usually associated with the death of someone, it can also be associated with other types of losses, many of which people are experiencing right now as a result of the current crisis. Might be the loss of a job, maybe the loss of security financially, certainly the loss of normalcy or routine, what you had been used to. The word that's used so often right now is unprecedented. These are unprecedented times, meaning we've never done this before. This is uncharted territory. Maybe you're grieving the loss of time to yourself, time for respite to get out and engage in activities that are fulfilling to you. Might those activities be limited right now because of what's going on? Certainly the loss of social connections might be at the top of anyone's list. And I think about our hospice patients and families. I think about the ability or lack thereof to be with one another physically present, to touch, hold hands, to hug, to have multiple family members at the bedside. All of this that you might have imagined has looked so different right now. So how is the current crisis affecting grief? Now, whether you're someone who's already experienced a loss previously and you're grieving amidst this time, maybe you're grieving the loss of someone as a result of COVID-19, or perhaps you're grieving not as a result of a loss related to death, but other losses, some of which we discussed previously. So no matter where you're at, there's many challenges folks are experiencing right now as a result of the current crisis. Could be increased feelings of anxiety, maybe concern for yourself or your family. Might it be a lack of closure? There might be family that aren't able to be physically present for a variety of reasons. Maybe you aren't able to travel with the current crisis, or there's restrictions with how many people can be present. Increased feelings of isolation and loneliness. Increased stress, some of which we've discussed, unemployment, financial strain. So how do you cope? How do you cope with grief amidst COVID-19? Certainly our first encouragement would be to take care of yourself. And I know in the previous episode of the Caregiver Support Series, Sarah discussed self-care, and I hope you took to heart in considering many of the great things she shared, one of which was self-check-ins. And I really encourage you to do that, to kind of check in with yourself throughout the day. Ask yourself, how am I feeling? Do I need anything? Do I need to eat? Have I been sleeping well? Covering some of even those basic needs. Find a routine and a schedule as best as you're able to provide structure. Maybe limit exposure to the news media and really stay connected and reach out as best as you're able. Maybe through utilizing any variety of the technology that's available, whether that's Zoom or FaceTime, Google Hangout, or a simple phone call. Stay connected to one another. And I encourage you, if you need to do so, we do have bereavement support available through Hospice of Northwest Ohio. So please don't hesitate to contact us and request to speak with one of us in bereavement. We'd be happy to speak with you. Take care, everyone.
That was wonderful, Maren. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to work with you. Isn't she great, you guys? Such a soothing voice. Thanks again, Maren. Now, in the Education Corner today, I'm pulling some information from a presentation that I had done for a group of nurses and social workers in the community. Hospice of Northwest Ohio is a continuing education provider for local healthcare workers, and I am one of the speakers who create CE programs, which we can also now do virtually. A group in Perrysburg requested a topic that I found fascinating during my research: cultural considerations at the end of life. So today I'm going to quickly share a few examples from that presentation. Have you ever been to the funeral of someone who practiced the religion of Hinduism? I haven't, but when you see an image of one, what is your immediate thought? Hindus traditionally dress in white, casual clothing. Actually, so do people who follow Buddhism. It is customary for the family to wear white or cover their clothing with a white cloth. One of the things I love about Buddhism is that some mourners walk with sticks to symbolize that grief has left them in need of support. I love that concept of sort of openly or publicly grieving. I feel like in our country, we try to keep that emotion of grief so private. But why? It's a natural and can be a healthy process. The other thing I love about the Buddhist tradition is that when a loved one is in the stage we call actively dying, it's encouraged to stay calm at the bedside for the healthcare providers and the family, and to not openly weep or grieve. While anticipatory grief in the face of a certain loss is normal and expected, the state and clarity of mind of the dying person at the time of their death is very, very important. So it helps your loved one if you're able to remain calm and help them face death with serenity. Buddhist teachings emphasize awareness of and preparation for death as ways to promote positive karma. Sidebar, I think a lot of people think that Buddha is God in the Buddhist tradition, but Buddha, in fact, was a man. He is and was considered an extraordinary man and the founder of the religion, but not a god. Buddha means enlightened or teacher. He sought a life without social indulgences, but also without deprivation, which was known as the middle way. The last example I want to give is from the Jewish faith. When a loved one dies within the religion of Judaism, there is a period of time from the moment of death until burial called Aninuit. where the surviving family members, called onin, are treated with the utmost respect and care by the community. Their needs are met, such as people providing them meals, and they have no religious obligations except to attend to the practical necessities of arranging a funeral for their loved one. This shows that they acknowledge that the grief-stricken cannot and should not have to focus on anything other than the immediate issue of the burial, which usually happens within 24 hours. Then, Shiva is the 7-day mourning period. Daily routines are broken to symbolize the disruption that death brings as people sit Shiva. There's also a huge emphasis on mourners not grieving alone, and I love that. Another cultural group that believes that socialization helps to ease the suffering grief can bring is the people of the Islamic faith. Followers of the religion of Islam are called Muslims. In some sects of the Islamic faith, there is a recognized mourning period of 40 days where the immediate family wears black, another sort of public way to express that grief has affected one's life. Do you find that interesting? If you're ready to learn more, get a hold of me. This first tip starts with a disclaimer. This presentation is not intended to be a definitive statement indicating how people may wish to be treated during their period of grief. When you're having a cultural conversation or assisting someone from a different culture than your own, the one thing you never do is assume. Be aware that there are so many variations within a given culture. Regardless of an individual's life experience, death and grief are normal life events for all of us. Different cultures have developed ways to cope, and interfering with those practices can disrupt the grieving process. So if you take nothing else away from this, please just remember, you cannot assume that because someone looks a certain way or tells you they are part of a religious group, that means they're going to react a certain way. You cannot assume that the way a person is reacting about their loved one's death is a direct result of their gender or age or race or religious affiliation. So bottom line is, do not assume. We all know what that really does. My second nurse tip is from Dr. Harvey Max Chochinov. He's a Canadian psychiatrist, and he came up with something called the patient dignity question. It's really kind of for healthcare providers, but I think it's relevant to everyone. I often use this question with patients when I first meet them as sort of an icebreaker. It conveys the message to them with intent that personhood, being a human being is on the table, and I am on their team. So you would ask, what do I need to know about you as a person to give you the best care possible? It is a question we all, as the patient, should be able to answer as well. So just some food for thought. If you're interested in learning more about the patient dignity question, this is a 4-minute video from Dr. Chochinov. And if you're interested in learning more about cultural considerations at the end of life, shoot me an email. The second video is a great refresher on the differences between race, ethnicity, and nationality. And it's a little less than 3 minutes. Thanks so much for watching. This has been an episode of the Caregiver Support Series brought to you by Hospice of Northwest Ohio. Next week, I will be talking about common medications used at end of life. Take care, everyone.